Hey everybody, this is Dr. Dustin Hendrix. We're coming back at you. We're in week 5 of this already. It's kind of hard to keep track at this point. Pretty amazing, right? So we want to hear how y'all been moving in between these lessons. Let us know, were you able to move? How you been moving? Let us know how your sleep's been. And we're going to keep kind of impacting stuff as we go. This week what we're going to be looking at is why do I have chronic pain? And this is going to be looking at the brain. And so you notice we have some brain facts here. And we're also going to be looking at some optical illusions that the brain can play on us. And then we're also going to be looking at a rehab board game today. So we're going to have a lot of fun. Okay guys, let's get into it. So this lesson is on chronic pain, and why you have it and how the brain decides it. And we're going to kind of look at the brain as like a CEO of a company. In the book Pain Neuroscience Education, they look at the brain as CEO of Body Incorporated. So it's kind of quite fascinating. But before we get into some of the heavier stuff, let's look at some brain facts. So it uses 20% of the body's oxygen. It's one of the fattest organs of the body, 60% fat. It's also made up of a lot of water, weighs 3 pounds. The brain is made up of 100 billion neurons. And so when you look at the word neuron, basically look at it as like a building block. So what I mean by that is, let's say you get a Lego castle. So when you get your Lego castle, you have all these little pieces, and eventually you'll put these pieces together and somehow they make a castle. Well, when you look at your nervous system, your spinal cord, your brain, your nerves, that long web. So when you look at that, the Lego blocks that make that up is what we call neurons. Brain has 125,000 miles of neurons. That's like crazy. Yeah. It's fascinating, right? The brain also has no pain receptors. So we've talked about that. The body doesn't, the brain doesn't. So we'll kind of unpack some of that and what's going on there. So something that we wanted to talk about with the brain is how it can kind of play tricks on us and how it perceives stuff. This one is called the Adelson's checker shadow illusion. So when you click on this page, you notice it takes you to an illusion. And so basically what it's looking at is block A and B different colors. And so it's really fascinating that you'll notice that we have a cylinder here, and basically when you actually go over the image, it will show you that once the cylinder is taken out, A and B are actually the same color on the blocks. So yeah, when you look at it now, you're like, okay, but when you take the shadow away, it's there. And you can look this up. This isn't just some thing on the internet that's trying to trick you. This is actually a known illusion. We went over it a lot in like psychology classes too. We'll go back here to our course, and then the other one of our illusions is, so when you look at this right here, ignore the bottom page right now on that one, it appears that this is the shortest, this is the longest, and this is the middle one. So longest, second longest, shortest. But when you actually look at them, the lines are actually all the same. And so the reason why these lines look bigger is just because of illusions and how our brain perceives things. So we want to talk about that because it's quite interesting to think about how the brain can be tricked. And that's also what's been going on in chronic pain, is the brain's been tricked. Okay. And it's fascinating because I have patients on the regular, and a lot of stuff that we hear is like, I heard a pop and I knew it was going to be bad, or I felt something and I knew it was going to be bad. A lot of people, they have this predetermined state of what their injury is going to be, and they don't even realize, just from telling your brain, hey, this is going to be a bad one, that your brain is actually going to overreact to an area, and it makes something that may or may not have been bad into an issue. I've even seen it with people, like, hey, I woke up, I was sleeping wrong, I heard a pop, and then it was bad. Yeah, the funny thing is, I'm going to move my ankle and see if you can hear this. Let me bring the mic down here. So yeah, if you can hear that popping, that's my ankle. It's done it since I was 13 or 14, and it never hurts. And that's why we always ask our patients, if something's popping, does it hurt? Okay, if it hurts, let's address it. If it doesn't hurt, okay, you're fine. And this goes back to, just because we have a tissue issue doesn't mean that there's pain, because pain is an output of the brain. Okay, so how does your brain decide if something is painful or not? It's called the pain neuromatrix. Okay, and so basically the easiest way to look at this is like an airline map. And I don't know if you've been looking at like an airline map before where it's showing where all the different flights are going. So that's what we look at in the brain. So we have a picture from Netter here. And with Netter, you can see all these complex areas, you know, the amygdala, we have the hippocampus inside here. And, you know, I'll talk a little bit about it. We don't want to get too bogged down. The amygdala is your alarm system. So it's quite fascinating because before you've even had a chance to use cognition and process something, your amygdala is already sounding an alarm whether you realize it or not, especially in like fight or flight or like danger type stuff. And you understand that was a great mechanism, you know, for prehistoric times, but now that we're in a modern world, it can really run haywire. The amygdala is very involved in things like obtrusive thought disorders, where people will hyper focus on a thought, and they'll almost make it into like a predetermined reality, but it's because of the amygdala firing. Hippocampus is involved in memories. They always called it seahorse. I believe that's what it meant in Latin. So that's quite fascinating. And then there's a lot of other structures, as you can see inside here. The cingulate gyrus, and then, you know, up in here is where we get into, you know, your motor cortexes and your sensory cortexes and things of that nature. So that's what they call the pain neuromatrix, and it's involved with perception, consciousness, memory. So a lot of this is what we call inside the limbic system, which is how we process emotions. Yeah, it's pretty deep. So we don't get too bogged down in there. We have this word at the Hibbian Theory. So basically that just means neurons that fire together, wire together. And the easiest way to think about this is if you've been in chronic pain, this will be like a little bit hit home, a little too real for you, because when you started out in chronic pain, let's say it was your back, you used to be able to do anything you need to lift stuff. So like, you know, you had to pick something up off the floor, like say it'd be a log, or, you know, do chores and laundry and stuff like that. Well, then after you hurt your back, all of a sudden, you know, light laundry would hurt. And then eventually you reached a place where even picking up like a shoe off the floor or like a coin or something that dropped could actually cause the back pain. And that's where the Hibbian theory comes in. And, you know, the classic example is the shoulder raising. So when you first hurt your arm in an overhead motion, it only hurt overhead, and then all of a sudden now it's hurting in the middle, and now it's hurting even at the side, and even thinking about it can cause pain. And yeah, you know, it's fascinating because we talked about the neuroplasticity, how the brain and the nervous system changes. And that's what's going on. We call it homuncular smudging. And I don't want to get too much into the homunculus, but basically the homunculus is a graph of perception of sensory areas inside the brain. So it's like they're taking a slice of the brain and they're actually looking at how does your brain have a spot for your fingers, and how does it have a spot for your hands and your arm. And so it's really fascinating because we see this in our chronic pain patients. We'll actually run a pinwheel over their thumb and they'll fill it up in their hand, or they'll say it's up in their arm. Or sometimes we'll actually be on the left side of the back and they'll fill it on the right. So it's really quite fascinating. They call it motor smudging or homunculus smudging. It's really, really hard to test. From a conservative side, the best that we have is, you know, 2-point discrimination. So basically having I'm actually in my office, let me grab it. So yeah, this was the pinwheel that I was talking about. So, you know, you see it a lot. Like I think it was used in Grey's Anatomy, like for neuro checks and stuff like that. And, you know, some neuro centers don't use it anymore because they have advanced imaging and stuff. But, you know, as a chiropractor, this is important because, you know, we're looking at nerve sensation and can you feel stuff, and is there a problem in specific, what we call a dermatome. So each spot on your body has a level that applies back to a level in the neck. And, you know, it can get a little bit muddy with the water of like, okay, this is a dermatome and this is like a myotome and stuff like that, but let's not get too bogged down in it. But yeah, so our patients with chronic pain will be on a finger and they'll actually fill it in their hand, or they'll fill it up all the way in the arm. And then 2-point discrimination is really interesting. So we have this little cube here, And with this little cube, it basically has different measures in millimeters, and we have a gold standard for what we like to see on people, and we'll basically have them close their eyes and tell us, do you feel 1 or do you feel 2? And you know, it's not a gold standard for this, but it lets us see into what's going on. And the other thing is the left and the right discrimination. So people who have this motor homunculus smudging, they have a really hard time processing whether a body part that's in pain is a left or a right side. And this gets into a little bit of the graded motor imagery and stuff like that, but we don't want to get too deep into that stuff. It's fascinating. It's really amazing kind of getting in there and figuring out what's going on. So let's get to our metaphor today. The easiest way to look at the brain is the CEO of the Body Incorporated, like we were talking about. So your CEO of the company, he's watching all these different divisions, and he's getting reports from these divisions constantly to see what's going on. And, you know, obviously if he gets a report back that he decides that this division is in danger or it's in problem, what's the CEO going to do? He's going to start poking around into there. If he decides that, hey, you know, there's really not a problem there, then he's going to let it go. But sometimes he will say, hey, you know, that's a problem. We need to look in this a little further. So let's get kind of in here and just kind of read it. The CEO, the president of the company, below them, you find all the divisions. It's normal for all the divisions to send reports to the CEO. This allows the CEO to monitor the organization and deal with issues. Okay. Now, our body works the same way. The brain is the CEO. It's checking your division, left shoulder division, low back division. And they're all sending reports back to the brain. And you'll notice I have some typos here that I'll be changing. So remember, I'm building these as I go, so sorry if I put what happens when the CEO gets a report that a division's not doing well? He'll start doing the routine reports. Your brain does the same thing, decides to act on an area it perceives as not doing well. This is from Pain Neuroscience Education. So what does this have to do with your persistent pain and your failed treatments? The brain is getting that report and starting to worry more and more about the pain, causing it to shift focus more to that area. This is where the pain catastrophizing comes in. You know, where we're just so focused on the pain. This is where the fear of movement comes in. You know, I'll never be able to move. I'll never be able to do what I love. I won't be able to pick up my kids. I'm going to be disabled. You know, we also see it with our thoughts too. My dad had this, so I was for sure going to have this. Oh, well, I have a disc bulge, so I for sure have the disability. Oh, well, I have this. You know, I was in a car wreck. People hold on to these things, and that's why I talk to my interns about this. And it's so important because, like, yeah, you want to give somebody the right diagnosis if that's what's going on. But like telling a patient, like, oh, because your wallet was in your back hip and you basically were like this, and that's what caused all of your pain. Well, yeah, it can be something that tips off the nervous system, but it's so much deeper than that. And it's like, you know, I have plenty of patients who have scoliosis, who just have a little bit of routine pain. And there's some people with scoliosis that have never had pain. You know, like the old thing of like, oh, well, you have one like that's shorter than the other, for sure you're going to have pain. That's not always the case. Yeah, so it's really, really important how we word this stuff. Now, your brain is getting more and more reports about this area. And what does this mean to you? When you have an ongoing pain, you become more aware of the area, what's wrong, the healing. The increased awareness means previous tasks that do not bother you start to bother you. This was the Hibbian Theory, you know, how we talked about, you know, initially you hurt your back lifting a heavy log, but now you can't do laundry, and now even picking up a coin is becoming painful, or your arm was hurt over here. That example. Now the CEO become overprotective. I don't know if you've heard the term worry wart. We used to tease my mom about that a lot. She's a great woman. If she's hearing this, I'm sorry. But you know, it becomes overprotective, you know, kind of that like a hover mother type thing, you know, it's overprotective, watching everything. If one division is underperforming, the CEO might start snooping into the other divisions as well. So this is how you can get this broad body pain. Complex regional pain syndrome, fibromyalgia. It's just so deep into that. Now you become more aware of other areas on top of the original area. The brain is the CEO of the body when it's worried about you, okay? So we kind of go through all that. The problem is an overly sensitive nervous system. The only way to calm it down is to move in a sort of safe manner. And from that movement, we're reinforcing what we know is that just because we move, it doesn't mean that it's going to make a tissue issue worse. You know, that's why we always screen people when we look at it. And, you know, this isn't an all or none type of thing. I've talked about that before. You know, you twist your ankle, you come in my office, it's been a day or two. Yeah, we're going to treat the ankle. you twisted your ankle 2 months ago and you haven't gone and you gotten treatment, and then you come into my office, we're probably going to treat the ankle and the nervous system. And now what happens if you come into my office and it's been 15 years of pain? Yeah, now we're treating mainly just the nervous system, because we're way past that tissue issue at this point. And we've already talked about that with the movement. So our homework this time is to move for 5 minutes. And once again, we're going to see if we can do that for 3 to 5 days. And we wanted to give you your first attempt at doing core work. So this is called the Rehab board game. This is something that I made myself. So on this board game, you'll notice that you can take a pawn down. Okay. So you can move it to the start. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to go over to this button right here, which is a dice. And you see how it'll pull up a dice. And when you actually hit that, it'll stop it. Okay. And so to go to 6, you're going to take your pawn. You're going to move it. And he's going to move over to 6. And so the interesting thing is how you get to number 6. I'd hope if I could count today. You're actually going to go up here. So you notice how a slide comes up, and this will actually take you to me doing a demonstration on the exercise. So what we've done on this one, if there was a way for us to regress it or progress it, I actually take you through that on the video. And so remember, if you're in a sore but safe, we're good. If you feel a 5 or 6, let's bring it down. And the other challenge is if you feel a 3 or 4, we're already 5 weeks into this, you're starting to kind of learn your body and your lines. You might try to do one set around a 3 or 4 and see if the next time you go around, is it down to a 1 or 2. We see this all the time with patients when we first make the move. Hey, I felt something sharp doing a bridge. And then all of a sudden, on the next round, they're like, the pain's gone. And I'm like, pretty amazing, right? Yeah, so it happens all the time. It's quite fascinating. And so you'll notice each one of these has a different exercise. And so how you go back to the beginning is you hit this dice and it'll take you to the first slide. And then you would roll again and they'll show you how this one has a different one. So we're hitting 6s, so we're going to take us all the way to 12. And it's going to be over here on this side or on the bottom here. And so we're really hitting these right here, but let's say that we had hit a 10. And you'll notice there's just different types of exercises. As we go through it, it's going to progress and regress. Okay. So your homework is to do the board game exercise, and we want to see if you can do that twice a week. And so remember, we're releasing these at a week out type modules, so that'll give you, spaced out. Maybe do one day. You might give yourself 3-4 days off, and then try it again. And remember, you want to be in a 1 or 2 sore but safe. If you are ever in a 5 or 6, bring it down. And remember, if 1 or 2 makes you sore for an entire week where you can't do the board game again, then we may need to regress it. And if you're having trouble just doing these and you need us to regress you in the office and teach you how to do the movements, that's what we specialize in. So, guys, thank y'all so much for coming on this journey with us. This is pretty amazing of a resource for y'all. What we've already approached is, we're building our cardio. If you've been successful at it, you'll notice now we're doing, it's hard to do math in my head, 25 minutes of cardio a week, which is fantastic. We're also adding a rehab game. We've already addressed sleep issues. And so what we're going to get into next week is we're going to actually look at stress and what's going on with stress. And we're going to deal with a meditation blog that we've written and how to look at that too, and how stress kind of plays into it. And then the week after that one, we'll go into chronic stress. Guys, thank y'all so much for coming on this journey with me. Keep being brave. Keep finding these lines, keep pushing. And if you're stuck and you need help, please reach out to us. All right. Thank you guys. Bye.